Have you ever tried to show up at work like everything's fine, when everything at home feels like it's falling apart? Midlife has a way of pulling you in a dozen different directions at once. Menopause, empty nest, aging parents, relationships. And somewhere along the line, we were told to just push through it, but you can't. None of us can. Today we're talking about why midlife hits your work life so much harder than people think, and what you can do when you feel stuck and unsure about your next step. And don't forget to hit subscribe to get more real insights. Heidi Hutchison is the founder and CEO of Third 30, where she helps women in midlife rethink their careers, rebuild their confidence, and find a path that actually fits who they are now. She spent more than 25 years as a senior marketing leader, guiding brands in the US and Europe, and holds both a JD and an MBA from Emory University. After facing her own midlife crossroads, she created Third 30 to give women the tools, clarity, and power she wished she'd had. I invited her here because so many women in our community feel stuck at work during midlife, and Heidi knows exactly how to help them find their next chapter. Heidi, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it is absolutely my pleasure, Holly.
You help women reimagine their careers and find purpose in midlife, but you didn't always do this. For a while, your path looked very different and things were going really well. And then
Absolutely.
something changed. Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. So let me give you a brief background. I spent the vast majority of my career as a chief marketing officer or a head of marketing for companies of various sizes, everything from startups up to Fortune 50s, Fortune 500. So that has been the predominant trajectory of my corporate career. However, about 2 years ago now, just shy, that abruptly came to an end when the company I was with at the time went through a restructuring, and I was basically reorged out of the company, which is common. It happens. As a chief marketing officer, I think the average time in place now is just shy of over 3 years, and I was well over that mark. So it wasn't good news, certainly, but it is what it is. However, the reckoning for me came when I started looking for another job. Because before I started Third 30, I was ready to jump back on the habit trail, so to speak, and get right back into the whole job search thing. And that was a rude awakening, shall I say, knowing that what all of the barriers that I was up against. One of them, obviously, age. I was a woman in my 50s looking at a C-suite level, looking for another role. That was a brutal reality that I wasn't prepared for. And all of the other factors that come into play for a woman in midlife. That the fateful menopause was hitting me in full force. Aging parents and having to deal with that. I've got kids still at home, so part of that sandwich generation, as they say. So all of these factors were coming into play and hitting me all at once. And I found myself, and I'm just being totally frank, isolated, feeling defeated, frankly, because I had been, in my mind, at the top of my game in my role. And then I suddenly found myself kind of lost, drifting, because I wasn't clear about where my worth was without that role. And that's truly where, I think, to your comment earlier about where Third 30 came in. Because that's really when I came to that realization of like, this is not all there is. There's got to be something else out there.
Well, I think your situation, unfortunately, happens to a lot of women, and you do feel sort of stuck and lost in midlife. And I mean, in your case, you were hunting for a job, but there's also a lot of women that are having to show up for work every day, and they're feeling all of these things.
Yes.
Do you help them sort through the transitions that they're in?
Absolutely, because transitions happen whether you're in a role or you are voluntarily or involuntarily not in a role. we as professional women in midlife are all facing, frankly, this transition of our core values shifting from what they used to be when we were in our 20s and 30s. I know for myself,
Hmm.
I wanted the title, I wanted the salary, I was up for the promotion. I was on that hard charging path up the corporate ladder. But now when I pause and reflect now as, a woman in my 50s pushing 60, is that's not so important to me anymore. My values now are, wait a second, I want to feel like I'm a valued contributor. I want to give back. I want to leave an impact. I want what I do to matter. And I think that's the difference for professional women in midlife, and where my company, Third 30, really comes in, is because I came up against all of those barriers that so many women in midlife come up against, which is unfortunately ageism, sexism, feeling marginalized or somewhat even times invisible because we are marginalized at a certain point in our career where suddenly the goalposts shift. Like before, not too long ago, we felt like and were appreciated as being at the top of our game. But suddenly, out of nowhere, it seems that, oh, no, sorry, you're not valued anymore, or you are not of the same um, level of contribution that you had been before. And I've started talking to a lot of other women, and they were saying the same thing to me, that they were experiencing this, that they were feeling like they were being put out to pasture, whether they are being in a role, like in the role they're currently in, or they were just kind of summarily let go, not for performance, but for some reason.
Yes, and
And
it's a vague reason at times, I feel.
yeah, yes, very, very
Hmm.
vague. And it's so hard to pinpoint, but what it leaves you with is this sense of questioning, of self doubt, of questioning yourself, questioning your worth, questioning all those years that you spent building up your brand and building up who you are as a professional. And what I realized in talking to countless women is, wait a second, this old narrative that, and this holds true for men too, is that we're washed up when we hit a certain age, is absolutely, dare I say, complete BS. It's just not the truth. And so when we're able, and I speak to professional women because that's my story, that's where my credibility comes from. When we're able to recognize, no one can take away from you the experience that you've had, the wisdom that you've built, all of that knowledge and capability that you have gleaned over these years. No one can take that away from you. Now is the time to build on that and to actually go and do something on your own terms, whether it be, there's three pathways essentially: become an entrepreneur, which, by the way, and this was a shocking statistic to me, is that over 50% of entrepreneurs today are over 55,
Yes,
which
but I
is
love
just,
that statistic.
I
I love
love,
that.
love, love, because it's all true. It's just that we're not sharing that knowledge as much as we need to, which is why I felt the calling to create and to build Third 30, which is a community specifically dedicated to professional women in midlife to help them transition into the next chapter of their lives where they can rediscover purpose, redefine success, and activate their next chapter in whatever form that fits for them. And that could be through reclaiming the power where they are. You don't need to leave your role to reinvent yourself. You can claim your power where you are. If you're in an environment or a culture that allows you to do that, you can take the entrepreneurial path and that small niggling calling that's always been telling you in the past, I've always wanted to do that. Or I've always thought that I would be really good at this. That's where your superpower lies, so to speak. Or the third one, which is actually one of the fastest growing portfolio careers, is what people are calling it, where people become fractional leaders using the wisdom that they've had. Like for myself, I was a fractional chief marketing officer. So I just used that and had the autonomy to build my own company around that. So there's a lot of different ways that women can hold on to their power and their autonomy and build on where they are in their lives in midlife, as opposed to just kind of giving up the show, because that's not an option.
Right. And it's not fair because we do have a lot of value.
Yes.
And when you see women start to doubt that, though,
Mm-hmm.
what steps do you want her to take?
It starts with what they call the end, which is where you need to acknowledge all of these old narratives, these old success scripts that you have for yourself. Like, for example, I'm too old. It's too late. I could never do that. All of those self-fulfilling narratives that we tell ourselves, we need to say them out loud, acknowledge that they're there, and then write new scripts for ourselves so that we can literally shed that those old narratives that are no longer serving us. A lot of them, frankly, got us to where we are today because they drove us to be successful, but now they're no longer helping us to fulfill ourselves and to show our true value. So you got to get rid of all that stuff. You got to get rid of all of that negative, toxic thinking, which is part of your mindset, obviously, that's keeping you stuck where you are.
Sometimes, though, we're in a job where you feel like you've been at this job for a while and you've done a really good job. But then
Mm-hmm.
there starts to be a disconnect from that feeling of maybe I don't want to be here anymore. Maybe this isn't,
Yeah.
I can't see myself spending another 10 years in this job.
Mm-hmm.
When that disconnect starts to occur, how do you help a woman navigate those feelings?
I call that the niggly knowing, where you have that kind of, it's kind of a whisper in the back of your head that it starts growing into, suddenly it's like this resounding roar in the back of your head that something is amiss, that there's more out there. And so one of the things that I would do with this person and what we do in Third 30 is I call it the messy middle because that's where you know that you are no longer being served by where you are. You recognize that there is more out there, that you kind of been there, done that. You've checked all the boxes and now you're looking forward, but you don't know which direction to go in. So you're kind of in this unknowing, this place of uncertainty. And it's very vulnerable because you're feeling a bit raw because you don't want to go back, but you don't have your pathway forward. So that's really a place that of vulnerability, but also where you have the best opportunity to explore and discover and do those things you've never had the opportunity or allowed, frankly, yourself to do that you've always wanted to, because that's when you start allowing your true self to come through and actually listen to where, dare I say, the universe is calling you. Like for me, it came out so clearly when I came out of this very difficult circumstance. But then I realized, Heidi, you're not alone. There's so many other women out there that are feeling exactly the same way. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. You were meant to experience this so that you can bring other women along with you and elevate them through this difficult time, this transition into finding out who you are and the woman you were meant to be.
Were you surprised by how many other women were out there?
Yes. And that's one thing. And Holly, this is something you and I have talked about before. We don't talk enough. We don't share our vulnerabilities and our perceived weaknesses with each other enough. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. At the same time that I was going through, um, the reorganization of the company I was with and trying to sort out what my next steps were, I was isolating. I wasn't reaching out to other women and saying, oh, I'm really doubting this, or, I have questions around this. I was putting my game face on and going out there and networking with the world as hard as I possibly could and pretending that everything was a-okay. When inside, I was in turmoil. Once I got over myself enough to be vulnerable and say, hey, you know what? this whole thing's really not working for me. And I'm realizing that I'm coming against barriers that I have never experienced before. Like all of a sudden, this job market is crickets, where I have absolutely never had a problem finding a job before. Now, luckily, I realized through this exercise that a job was not what I was looking for, or a career, a corporate career was not what I was looking for. Um, but it is the power of community and being able to come together and be vulnerable with each other and share the lessons learned and also the celebrations. Because this period of difficulty is temporary, it is not a forever thing. But to get unstuck, you have to be able to work through and do the hard work, which is really recognize what's holding you back. Why are you dissatisfied with where you are? How do you discover who you want to be and what you want to do? And that's not easy. To some people, it's easier to stay where they are than it is to actually take those courageous steps to explore what other opportunities might be available for them.
I hate to see women in that position, though,
Yeah.
to stay where they are because they don't feel that there are other options for them out there. And I'm sure you've seen this
Yeah.
in in your own community, that they feel stuck and they're willing to just sort of settle there and ride it out. What advice would you give to that woman? Because I'm sure you don't want to see her there either.
No, and that's part of what Third 30 is about, is to bring all of these women under the community to raise each other up. So please, 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 if you are feeling this way, do not stay there on your own. Reach out. If not to the Third 30 community or something like it, reach out to a friend, reach out to a colleague. Do not isolate, because there is no shame in going through a transition. There is no shame in saying, this is not enough, I want something else. Because fear is one of our biggest blockers for progress and moving forward, because it keeps us where we are. So for me, my core values that I came up with, I've realized when I was going through my own transition. And the first one is courage, because courage is what allows us to face fear and act anyway. Because we all have fear. We cannot deny the fear. If you do, you're not being truthful to yourself, frankly. We all have fear, but it's recognizing that fear is there and acting anyway, doing the hard things anyway. That's where freedom lies, at the end of that path.
Well, can we talk about fear for a minute? Because
Yes.
sometimes women are afraid for some very legitimate reasons,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to their job. They still have to pay the mortgage. They need health insurance. They have to show up at this job.
Yes.
But how do you help women think differently about their work so that they're not just going to walk away from it, but maybe they can explore some other opportunities?
So I say two things to that. One is take care of yourself first. Okay. My first advice to any of Third 30 members of the community or of my clients is, don't just jump ship. Make sure that you have a soft landing where you're going. So you can make a mental mind shift happen in the role that you're in before you necessarily leave. So what I say to many of my clients is, their identity is so closely tied with the company that they work for and the role that they have at that company. The first shift needs to happen before they jump ship at all, is to shift that loyalty and that identity to themselves and their own value that they bring and the wisdom and experience that they have, because that will travel with them wherever they go or if they stay. But if it all sits with the company and like, I'm only this if I'm with this company, that's where the fear lies. But that's not the truth. The truth is that you experienced and accomplished all of those results with that company, not because of that company. And when you're able to make that distinction, then you can sit in your own power and say, you know what? I'm going to take this and I can translate that into XYZ role over here, even if I'm going to be going and continuing in my corporate role, Or I can translate that into a fractional role or doing my own thing and creating my own business, whatever that may be. You don't need to suddenly say, you know what, I'm out of here. Because that's not fiscally responsible.
Yes,
You
don't
know,
do
you
that.
feel like you want to do that, but probably not the best thing right away. So take care of yourself first and realize that your allegiance is to yourself first. Your company, yes, but yourself first. And that's where the fiscal responsibility comes in. It's like, hey, if you're earning a good salary where you are, you can continue to explore the messy middle and find out where you want to go while you're employed with that company. That is not in any way being disloyal or some kind of conflict of interest. No, not at all. It means that you are taking care of yourself and you're still serving the role that you play within that company.
I'm so glad you said that about transferring how you identify instead of the role with the company to yourself. I've never really thought of it like that before, but that is an important adjustment I think you have to make.
It is. And it's one of the things that I work with my clients on is that build your personal brand because your name and the all of the contacts you have, all the industry connections, all of that travels with you. So make sure that in the area of your expertise, are you known as a thought leader? Do people know who you are? Do they know what you stand for? Do they know about your character? All of those things are a very important part of who you are, and you will take into whatever next chapter that you choose to pursue. So that's what I spend a lot of time with my clients on is taking who you are and making sure that it's aligned with your core values, and so that you are actually living a life that is of purpose to you. And we'll figure out what, fill in the dots as to what that actually looks like. But that's almost the easy part of living a purpose-driven life. It's just how to make sure you are putting yourself first, you are understanding enough about yourself to be able to know what your core values are, know what your why statement is, know what you are meant to be in this world, so to speak. I know a really good mentor of mine used to always say, Heidi, I'm going to, with her coaching of me, help you be the woman you are meant to be. And that's what I'm in turn trying to help the women that I work with. Find your next chapter, activate your next chapter with purpose and passion.
Yes, exactly. You talked briefly about or described this as kind of the messy middle. And
Yes.
it is a little messy. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about that for a minute because I also wanted to tie in vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
because we are very vulnerable, I feel, at this stage of our
Yeah.
lives. There's a lot of different things happening, a lot of things coming at us, and sometimes we need to work with our employer, especially if you are going through some stuff. Maybe you are a caregiver or you find yourself, your kids are still at home and they need you for a variety of reasons. Are these some of the issues that you also help women talk to their current employers about so that they do feel more empowered to go in and say, I'd like to continue working here, but I need some help?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Is because confidence is what allows you to be able to go in and have those difficult conversations where without the confidence, you perceive yourself as being in a position of weakness or in a position of scarcity in the sense of, oh, if I say this to my boss, I might get fired or I might not get promoted or I'm not going to get that bonus that he promised me because, and notice I said he or she, um,
Yes.
that they will see me as less than if I show up in a way that could be perceived as she can't be there all the time or she's not available 24/7 or that kind of thing. And that is another narrative that we need to work through because oftentimes women leaders, we are successful because we have gone above and beyond. We have done more than we necessarily needed to do. We were available or made ourselves available 24/7. So we have this higher expectation for ourselves and how we show up than perhaps others might. So to go forward and say to your boss, you know what? I'm going to have to take a couple days, or I'm not going to be able to work on Fridays, or whatever that term is. We're reluctant to come forward because we're afraid. We're afraid that we're going to be perceived as not a team player, or it's a limitation on our future advancement. So, in order to get through that fear, is you need to build confidence in your own value, because that's where you can come from a position of power and say, okay, this is my, let's just say, this is my department. These are the results I've got. We are on budget. We are above track on getting these results. My boss knows that. So then I know, you know what? I'm doing all these things and I'm getting the job done. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to need X, Y, and Z. I'm going to need
Mhm.
little concessions on here. But when you present it as a position of, so let's face it, the company just wants you to get the job done at the end of the day. If you're doing the job and you need some concessions, then go forward with your value. Because if you bring that value to the company and you are confident in how you're coming forward, you're not Oliver Twist asking for more. You're coming forward and basically saying, hey, this is what I need. How can you accommodate me? It's flipping the switch on where the power is. Does that make sense?
Yes, completely. It's almost like you've been putting into this bank, and now that
Exactly.
you need it,
Yes.
you hope that you're being recognized for that.
So it's less about asking permission and more about collaborating and partnering on how your needs are going to be met.
Mhm.
It's a very different mindset.
As long as we're in the messy middle, I need to bring it up because I'm wondering if you've had these conversations with some of the women that you work with now, because I'm hoping that we feel more confident bringing this conversation up in work, and that's menopause and the experiences that we're having with it. Have you found that more women are bringing this to your attention because it's something that either they're struggling with real symptoms and hot flashes and brain fog and just being so tired that it's almost hard to show up every day?
I'm definitely hearing more and more women come up and say about how menopause is affecting them in the workplace and just frankly in their lives in general. And I will honestly say it, and I'm so not embarrassed because that would be too strong, but I myself shied away from talking about it. And here I
Mhm.
am, the woman that's promoting, honesty and credibility and authenticity and, use your power. But at the beginning, I was one of those people that didn't want to talk about it because when I was in the corporate world, I had my game face on. I didn't want
Mhm.
anybody to know that, gosh, maybe I wasn't 100% today. And I realized the fallacy of that because 50% of the population goes through this. It's really ridiculous when you think about it. And frankly, for me, the more research I did and the more I realized how downplayed menopause was, I got angry. I'm like,
Mhm.
are you kidding me? This is a fact of life. This is not something that women can avoid. If you're lucky enough to live long enough, then you
Yes.
are going to go through this experience. And so I find that the women groups that I'm in are talking about it more openly, almost to the point where we're now laughing about it because at the beginning it was painful. You know how sometimes you have to go through the painful part before you can actually look back and laugh? Well, a lot of us still going through the painful part, but at least we're laughing about it. Oh my Lord, that kind of thing. But it's a reality is that menopause, for me, I remember when I was first having menopause symptoms, I went to my doctor, as one does, and she's a woman, believe it or not. I told her, and I quote, I'm having memory loss or word choice. I would look at something, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell you. I knew it was a bicycle. Hello, Heidi, bicycle. Okay, escape me. Fatigue, hair loss. What else was there? Sleeplessness. I just went through a whole host, every one of which was a symptom of menopause. My doctor not once mentioned that that might be it and that I might seek a specialist in HRT or whatever menopause
Right.
type of treatment. She sent me to get an MRI to check to see if I had cognitive decline. sent me to a sleep lab to see if I had some kind of sleep disorder. I mean, it went on and on. I went to every specialist you could possibly imagine before finally someone completely not a doctor said, you know, Heidi, you might think that it's menopause. And I'm a highly intelligent woman, and it didn't occur to me either because nobody talks about it. So I'm very glad that people are talking about it more, but it's real. And I wish that it were a more open conversation in the business world, like amongst other groups and just women in midlife who happen to be going through it. I'd like it to be a much broader conversation and that it's taken into consideration, just like pregnancy or another part of a life stage.
I had a very similar experience. There was one time when I was struggling with a lot of the same symptoms that you were talking about. And when I left that doctor's office, I had 6 appointments.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, I was going to a sleep doctor. I was going to a
Thank you.
migraine doctor. It
Yeah,
just went on and on.
yeah,
And I was like, what?
yeah.
Like,
No, seriously, I was like, I can't. All of a sudden, I went from being totally healthy to being a complete medical mystery. I was a,
yes.
how did this happen?
But I think to your point from before, we need to make sure that we are sharing our stories because you
Yes.
talked about how when the women come together and you say, "Hey, this is
Yeah.
happening to me too." It allows us to kind of just relax into the problem and say, "Okay, I'm not the only one. There's a community of women out here. We're all, feeling the same thing.
Mhm.
So how do we fix it?" Instead of feeling like
Exactly.
you're on this island by yourself.
100%. 100%. And I find that the call it therapy, call it what you will, but just the knowledge that there's other people out there that are experiencing the same things you are, bring this sense of this wash of relief. And it brings you out of the isolation. You know what? Hey, I'm not the only one. And it lifts you up. And that's part of what Third 30 is all about. It's just acknowledging the issues that we're facing as women, acknowledging them so that we have that solid platform that we can then rise to the next level. But when we're all in our silos and we're not talking to
Mhm.
each other and we're not, sharing our collective experiences to lift each other up, and we're just then that's where the fear takes over. And that's a lot of the reason why women stay stuck is
Mhm.
because they feel alone and in fear. And that is a horrible, horrible place to be. And I find that, especially when I speak to women about this, when they're able to actually shed all of this, like I said, old BS about how they should or shouldn't be, oh my God, they blossom. And because they're actually realizing all of who they are without all of these toxicity that's bringing them down. It's like they
Mhm.
shed and they have this whole new, it's kind of like a butterfly, they come out and
Yes.
they have all this new sense of self-worth and confidence and just clarity on like, this is what I was meant to do and damn it, I'm going to do it. And they bring all the drive, wisdom, and experience of all the years before with them.
I think you referred to something along the lines of non-negotiables. I was looking on your website. It was the career transition checklist,
Mm-hmm.
and I know the non-negotiables are going to be different for everybody.
Right.
But how do you help women decide what those are in that particular moment?
That's a great question because the non-negotiables, you can call them core values, you can call them the vision of how I want to live my life, but it's those things that you come to realize I must have in order for me to feel fulfilled, in order for me to feel joy, in order for me to feel like I am living life to the fullest. And you're right, for everybody, it's different. For me, mine came down to I want to live my life with courage. I need connection. I need to be in community with other people, specifically in this case, women, but not just women. And I need joy. I've got to love what I'm doing and feel joy coming from it, or I'm not interested. That's the thing is that, and I have this other phrase that I say is that if someone asks you to do something or you're testing in your own mind whether something is right for you, if it's not a hell yes,
Mhm.
it's a no. In fact, it's maybe a blankety blank no. And that sounds so simplistic, but if somebody asks you something or a way that, your non-negotiables, if it doesn't light you up when you say, yes, I have to have that in my life, then it's not a non-negotiable, because these are visceral things that you realize in your core, in your heart, in your gut, in your soul, that you must have in order to feel fully alive.
Yeah, because I think we have that question in our head. Well, do I really want this? And I think if you have to question it,
Yeah.
it's not what
And
you're looking for.
100%, you hit the nail on the head, Holly. Absolutely. If it isn't a hell yes, it's a
Yes,
hell no.
right. You know, from the women that I've talked to in my community, we've gotten conditioned to put up with a lot of stuff
Yeah.
because we put others first. If it's not family or children or husband, there's a lot that comes
Yeah.
before us sometimes. Midlife changes a lot of that for us. And I think women are getting to the point where they don't want to put up with this anymore.
Yeah.
And I think you are a good example of that because you walked away from work that wasn't working for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What changed in your mindset that allowed you to come into that power and feel confident that you were making the right decisions?
That's a really good question. I'll tell you how. It was only the grace of time that gave me the ability to separate myself enough from my role to actually recognize that it wasn't me. It's one of the difficult things that we have when we've been in a corporate career for so long, is that we're so closely tied to what we do and our title, our salary, and all those things, that it's very difficult at first blush to just say, oh, okay, I'm going to give that up and now I'm going to go do this thing that's any different than what we did before. So I was given the grace of time, and I'm talking not years, obviously months or weeks actually, of being able to walk away or step away from that to where I could look back on it with some level of detachment to realize that's not me. That's not who I am anymore. And when I could no longer recognize who that person was, that's when I had the freedom to be able to say, wow, I have an option to be something else. And this is where the crux of some of the difficulty of this transition is that if you don't, whether you're in a role, and you could do this while you're still in a role, you don't have to physically separate yourself. But if you don't isolate yourself somewhat from the role that you're in or detach in some way, it's that distance that gives you the ability to see dispassionately, or at least somewhat dispassionately, where your identity is, versus when you're over here, you can see, oh, there's light at that tunnel. I can see myself moving in a different direction. So for me, to answer the question, when did it come to me? I literally was having coffee with a woman that used to work for me at my previous role. And we were sitting there, and it was right around the holidays. It'd been about maybe a month or so since I had left the organization, still in my severance, severance package or whatever. We were just talking, and she was like, "Well, what are you doing? What are you doing with your time?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm just really thinking about this stage in my life, and the first 30 years of my life are all about learning who you are as an individual and kind of growing up a bit, and then the second 30 are all about family and career. Like, that was my choice if you choose to have that. Now I'm kind of in this third 30, and I don't really know. It's kind of like this blank slate." And that was literally from that conversation that I was like, holy cow, third 30. That's where the name of the company came from.
Okay.
And this epiphanal moment of me realizing, holy cow, there is this whole 30 years that have yet to be defined, because that's what longevity, that's how long people are living on average now, 86.4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That have no longer been defined. Our middle age has expanded from 40 to 70. Now, before it used to be like 40 to 50 or whatever. Now it's 40 to 70. Some people will say it's even in your early 30s or mid 30s. So we are living longer, more vibrant lives, but nobody has come in and filled in the blank of what that means for professional people that are not going to retire when they hit 60. So that was when I had my moment of forget, I've checked the box. I've done all that C-suite, blah, 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 VP, blah stuff. Okay. Done that. Now I have a new calling of like, holy cow, there are so many women out there that are just sitting in this unknowing, either literally stuck or not necessarily stuck, but just know there's something more, but they don't know where or how or what direction. And that's what Third 30 is all about, is helping you get from where you are now to that vision for what your future can be.
What's that first step for that woman to take when she sees that change is about to happen?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't know what that change is going to look like, but she also knows there's no going back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one, I offer Third 30 to you. Obviously, I'd be happy to help. But the first thing is that start doing your research, in the sense of start doing the inner work on yourself. Is what I tell my clients: figure out what are your core values, what's important to you. Do a vision board, figure out what do you want your life to look like in 12 months from now. And I know that that sounds trite, but it literally is journaling, thinking about what do you want your life to look like. And it's carving off, if possible, all the easy answers of, I want to be this. That's not what it's about. It's like, what I want to be. What do I want to become? Not who do I want to be? If that makes sense, because who I want to be is a title. It's a job that you fit yourself into. Who do I want to become? That's who do you want to internally manifest? How do you want to show up in life? What do you want to offer?
Based on your experience in the workplace and now with what you're doing, what do you want women to know about this stage of their work life that maybe you've uncovered that nobody's really telling them?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that midlife is not a decline. It is the beginning of your reinvention. It literally is the time, I call it midlife is a power move. It literally is that time in your life where you can do what the power pivot to actually embrace who you are, to identify your superpowers for whatever they may be, because we all have them, and carve a path for yourself that's going forward, that is filled with purpose, passion, and profit. This is about making money still. This isn't about giving up the ghost. This is about how can I continue to have a professional identity, but just on my terms. And that's exactly what people need to realize, is that now is the time to actually for you to flourish, because you can do so from your own power, and it's not dependent necessarily on who you work for or what company or logo you have on your shirt.
Well, before we leave here today, where do you want people to connect with you? Where is it best to find you? What's going on with Third 30? And yeah, how do we find Heidi?
Well, I'd be happy to tell you that. You can find me on my website, which is www.third30, and that's THIRD30.com, or you can reach me at Heidi at third30.com. DM me on LinkedIn. All of those access points are available to you. And I'd be happy to talk to you. If you are interested in doing a discovery call with me, you could just go on my website and book that. The whole calendar is there. And my mission in life is to literally help professional women in midlife rediscover purpose, redefine success, and activate the next chapter in their life with purpose, passion, and profit. So I'm here to help if you would like to talk.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you for joining us on Real Insights. If you want to hear more about how other women find peace in the chaos, order your copy of Empart, Real Stories, Real Wisdom, Real Menopause on Amazon today. And don't forget to join the conversation at joinempart.com. Until next time, remember that menopause is a journey, but you're not alone.